Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to a freezing cold house. One family is faced with just such a thing in this story, written by GorillaOfUndeath. But as they soon find out, there is more to the cold than a simple snowstorm. The family will need help soon, or else they will all surrender to the cold. If anyone receives this message, please send help. I live in, and my family and I are in dire need of assistance. We are freezing to death and need help now. I know this is all confusing, but my fingers are so cold. We can't get out of our house. Let me start from the beginning. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sounds of my mom and dad moving in the living room. It was freezing, like brutally cold, a kind of unnatural cold that seeps into your body and remains there, no matter how many blankets or layers of clothing you put on. I could only lay there in bed, frozen by the cold. I wondered why it was so damn cold. When I went to sleep, everything was cozy. I had snuggled into bed under layers of warm blankets and fell into a deep sleep, only to be awoken to the cold. I heard my older brother stir from his room next door and trot down the hallway to join Mom and Dad in the living room. I could hear their whispers of concern and worry, and I thought something bad was happening. I checked my watch and saw it was 3:22 a.m. Way too early for any of us to be awake, but I guess the fact that I could see my breath meant that something was wrong with our heat. For the house to get this cold in the short matter of time seemed bizarre. "What are we going to do? We're going to freeze," I heard my mom whispering. "We're not going to freeze. We'll have to get a fire going. Adam, I'm gonna need your help," Dad said. I heard Adam let out a long sigh before moving to help Dad. I took in a deep breath, preparing myself for the grating cold that would assault me when I pushed the blankets from my body, but I had to know what was going on. I pushed the blankets off quickly and scrambled for my dresser drawer to find a warm pair of fleece-lined pants, a hat, and 2 hoodies. There was no way I wanted to put on my proper winter coat to sit in the house. It just didn't seem right at all. I met the rest of my family in the dark living room. My mom sat on the couch dressed in warm clothes and with several blankets around her. Our eyes met and she called me over and tossed me a few spare blankets, shivering all the while. I could see the digital thermostat said the room was currently only 23 degrees. My dad and brother were trying their best to light a fire, but they didn't have enough good kindling to really get it going. Black smoke billowed into the room, making us cough. "Damn it!" my dad shouted in frustration. Dad kept lighting pieces of newspaper, trying to get a large log to catch on fire, while my brother kept fanning the flames, hoping to get it going. We kept a few pieces of wood in the house for emergencies, but the vast majority of our firewood was kept in a small shack on the line of our property. I don't think we used the fireplace more than a handful of times in 5 years. "What's going on with the heat? How'd it get so cold in here?" I asked. "Heaters are broken, it seems. There must be some sort of freak storm out there, 'cause the temperature really dropped. Must be in the negatives out there," Dad said with a frown. "Is the fire almost ready?" Mom asked. "It's not starting. All our kindling is outside. We'll need more wood too eventually, even if we do get this thing started. I'll have to gear up and grab some." Adam chimed in at that moment. "I'll go out there and get it. You can stay here and keep trying to light the fire." Dad seemed hesitant at first, but granted him permission. "Alright, but don't mess around out there. Just get the wood and come back in. Too cold to be out there for long. You'll get frostbite." Adam seemingly brushed this warning off. He was cocky, and usually dismissed my parents' advice. He was the rebellious one, while I was typically more level-headed and rational. Adam went back down the hall for a few seconds. I looked to my dad, who kept trying to light more newspapers in an attempt to get the log to catch fire. My mom only pulled her blankets around her tighter as she desperately watched to see if the fire would start. I pushed up one of the blinds to try to see outside, but I found that all the windows were frosted over, making it almost impossible to see anything clearly. You could make out shapes and colors, but beyond that there was nothing much you could see. I could see large snowflakes coming down out there. Apparently a snowstorm had blown in unexpectedly. I turned back to see my brother emerge from the hall, dressed in his large winter coat and decorated with a thick hat and heavy gloves. He carried a large sled that was slung over his back and held with a rope. "This is gonna be sweet," Adam said. Dad looked at him angrily. "What the hell is the sled for? You're only supposed to get some firewood and kindling and come back. The house is freezing. This isn't time for you to mess around." Yeah, of course. The sled is for the wood and stuff. I can drag it through the snow on this. It'll be easier." Dad couldn't really argue with that logic, I guess. He could certainly bring back more wood on the sled than carrying it by hand. I followed him as he went for the back door. I wanted to see what was going on outside. At the time, I was curious how a storm like this had come on with no warning. Adam opened the door quickly, revealing clearly what was going on outside. I took a peek and saw snow piled high, and more falling in almost blizzard-like conditions. Shards of ice hung from the roof of the house like cold daggers. In the distance, through the hazy wall of snow and ice, I swear I could see a human-like figure, illuminated by a subtle blue light. It waved its arms in the cold night. It seemingly had no lower torso that I could see, only an upper torso that seemed to connect to the snow or something. It swayed back and forth in an almost rhythmic motion. A shudder ran through me, and I instinctively blinked. Then I could see nothing but the blizzard continuing to rage. A frigid wind pushed its way into the house with a roar that chilled me to the core. The house creaked as the strong wind buffeted the side. I watched him shut the door behind him, fighting against the strong wind that so desperately wanted to invade our house. I ran over to one of the windows to peer out and saw as his silhouette grew smaller and smaller as he made his way over to the wood shack. And then we sat in the living room and waited for Adam to return. My dad kept trying to light the fire while my mom went to work making us coffee and hot cocoa to hopefully help warm us. I sat down on the couch with a cup of hot cocoa and saw my dad still struggling to keep the log burning alongside sips of his coffee. But the log continued to scorch and smoke up the place. We drank our warm beverages and waited, and we waited, and we waited. Dad had given up on getting the fire going without some proper kindling or some smaller wood pieces. Eventually, we began to grow concerned. It shouldn't have taken 20 minutes to gather a few pieces of wood and kindling from the shack. The three of us were by the windows trying to look for a sign of him. I went over to the window again and tried to look out to see if I could get a view of him. I could see that figure again, or at least the outline highlighted by that blue light. The silhouette danced in the blizzard. Looking at it made me feel cold and hollow, but I couldn't determine what it was through the frosted glass. I was about to call my dad over to look at it when he started speaking. "What the hell is keeping that boy? I better suit up and go find out what's going on out there. Seems it's getting even colder. We need to get the fire going." Dad was right, of course. The house temperature had dropped to 16 degrees, and if things continued, it would get even colder. My dad pulled up the blinds on one of the windows, trying to look outside to see what was going on, but a thick layer of ice kept us from really seeing too much, save for murky silhouettes. I put my face closer to the window. I could feel the cold air seeping through into our house, eradicating the remaining warmth our house held. Suddenly, A loud crack rang through the house as something smashed into the window. It cracked and I jumped back as my mom let out a shrill scream. Dad turned towards the source of the noise. "What the hell was that?" Dad yelled. Something hit the window. It's cracked," I said. "What was it? I know it's windy out there, but to crack a window like that?" I don't know what it was, but something definitely hit the window. I think there might be something else out there." "Something else out there? Like an animal?" "I don't think birds are flying in this weather. I'm going outside. I need to see what is going on out there. I need to find Adam. He's probably messing around building a whole snowman family or sledding down the hill like I told him not to. We need to get this place warm soon, or the pipes will freeze and burst." "No, I don't know. It looks like someone off in the distance waving their arms." "Ah, jeez. It's probably your idiot brother messing around out there. I told him this is important, and of course he doesn't listen. I'm going." This time I volunteered to go outside with my dad and help him. 2 of us could carry more wood, or at least I could look to find Adam and bring him back onto his task. Things were beginning to look dire for us if we didn't get the fire going. I put on my heaviest coat, snow boots, hat, and gloves. Dad and I made our way to the back door. I was feeling a bit nervous about the whole thing. There was no way that figure was Adam. Outside was colder than I expected. The cold went right through my coat and clothing. I couldn't believe Adam would want to be out in this, even if he did want to go sledding. I followed behind my dad as the blizzard raged, and about halfway to the woodshed we saw the sled. It was mostly buried under the falling snow. There was wood on it, but with it being covered in snow and mostly frozen, it was now useless. My dad pulled the sled from the snow and pushed the frozen wood off. "I'll need to get dry wood. You go and look for your brother. He couldn't have gone far," Dad yelled at me. My dad's form quickly faded as he walked off into the blizzard. I turned and went the other way. Visibility was getting even worse, and there was no way I could stay out here that long. I walked around yelling my brother's name again and again, trying to get him to come out. My toes and fingers were already beginning to feel the cold. It was then I started hearing a crunching noise, like someone was walking through the snow, following me. I thought it was Adam trying to freak me out, staying just out of sight to mess with me. I was honestly getting pretty scared. My heart beat fast. Being out in the freezing dark of night was not all that fun, and I had an intense feeling that I was in danger. I had seen something strange earlier and was already feeling nervous when I came out, so this didn't help the situation. "Come on, Adam, this isn't funny," I yelled. A figure finally came into view, and I felt a moment of relief. But as the figure drew closer, my relief turned into sheer horror when I realized it was not Adam. It was not my dad either. It was something else shambling towards me. Heavy footfalls left imprints in the snow that quickly froze over. I could feel cold radiating off the thing as it grew closer. A frozen eyeball hung from its socket. It wore clothes that were torn and ragged, revealing bluish-gray flesh that was definitely unnatural. Icicles hung from the ends of its clothes. There were holes in its skin, exposing grim yellow bones. Some protruded out and had frozen over. The thing stepped towards me and I instinctively began moving away from it. It opened its mouth, letting out a noise that was a mix between a roar and a moan, before snow poured out of its mouth and onto the ground, adding to the already deep snow. I screamed and darted off away from the thing. I didn't even go towards the house, I was so panicked. I don't know what the hell that thing was, but I knew I had to get the hell away from it. I heard it following me for a bit, but it couldn't match my speed as I trampled through the snow. I tripped and fell. My body sunk into the cold snow and I actually began to feel warm. They do say that people often feel warm when they are starting to freeze. Adrenaline pumped through me as I pushed myself free from the snow. I tried to calm myself down. I cupped my hand over my eyes to try and see where I was in the now nearly blinding blizzard. Not far in front of me was a large pile of snow. It was unnatural. No one had shoveled, and there were no plows around that could have piled snow that high. I eyed the pile of snow for a moment with suspicion and fear. I realized I needed to get back home, but as I was about to run off, bits of snow began to roll down off the pile before greater cracks appeared. Suddenly, a skeletal hand pierced the barrier of snow, causing more snow from the pile to fall to the ground. A skeletal head appeared. Unnatural blue light escaped from the sockets of the skull. There was a distinctive crown of ice that almost sparkled. I stood paralyzed with fear, or maybe it was the cold. I felt colder than I ever had before as I realized this was the thing I had seen earlier. It had been covered in snow in that short amount of time. It shook its head, causing more snow from the pile to fall to the ground, before starting to move its long, lanky arms that pushed the majority of the snow off it. It had an upper torso, but its lower torso was seemingly nothing but snow and ice. I could only watch in horror as the thing placed a hand onto the ground. Moments later, there were areas of blue light seemingly penetrating the thick snow around me. I watched as more and more spots began to get that sickly bluish glow, and then they all faded. The snow that was affected by that blue light all began to crack and move as hands and then bodies emerged. It was the same as the thing I had seen earlier. Bluish-gray skin and ragged clothes. The cold was almost unbearable. I couldn't feel my toes or fingers, but I knew I had to move as the things began to wail and shamble towards me. I was so scared as I ran to the house. I could hear the footfalls of those zombie-like things following behind me as fast as they could. When I reached the house, I felt a sense of relief, but as I ran past the cracked window towards the door, my foot stepped on something, causing me to nearly trip and fall. I quickly took a moment to dig around the snow and pulled out something heavy and covered in frost and snow. I turned it over in my hand and brushed off some of the snow. Terror flooded into me as the snow fell from the object. Cold, dead eyes stared up at me, the visage frozen into a look of terror. It only took me a second to realize what it was as I dropped the thing and turned to vomit. It was Adam's severed head. One of those things must have got him. I ran inside, panicked and with tears in my eyes. The house was warmer now, and my dad was there, by a healthy fire, taking off his winter coat and hat. "Did you find Adam?" Dad asked. I couldn't muster a response. How the hell could I tell him that Adam was dead? I tried to keep my tears back, but they came out anyway in heavy streams. I blubbered like a baby for a moment, trying to compose myself. Yeah, my brother was kind of a dick, but he was family. I figured my dad would think I was being a baby or mock me, but a serious look of concern came over his face. My mom had got up too and now eyed me curiously. I didn't want to be the one to break the news. "What's wrong? Where's Adam?" Dad asked me. I didn't answer him again, only stood there crying. My mom put her arm around me and sat me down on the couch. My mind was a mix of grief and fear. Those things were still out there. It took a minute of crying before I found my resolve to tell them what was going on. "There's these things out there. A lot of them now. They got Adam. I think they're coming this way." They didn't even have time to process what I was saying when a heavy thud came from the side of the house. We all stopped for a moment and listened. Then there was another thud, and another. Suddenly the cracked window broke and one of those things toppled in, bringing with it a stream of cold wind. Snow steadily poured from its mouth. What the fuck is that? Dad shouted in horror. The thing lunged at my dad, sinking its frozen teeth into his neck. Dad screamed as it tore into him. Blood squirted from his neck in a vicious spray that coated the thing's face. Dad kicked at the thing, sending it toppling to the ground as another had begun to crawl in the window. He grabbed my mom's hand, who stood there shocked and screaming in terror. He clutched his other hand at his bleeding neck. More of them were entering the room through the window. I heard a boom as our door toppled to the ground, and more of those things poured into the room, bringing with them snow and ice. We ran down the hallway for the basement. It had a heavy steel door that we were able to lock and keep those things out. That brings us to now. I can hear their footsteps and moans above us. It's slowly getting colder down here. We were able to stop Dad from bleeding, but now he has some sort of frostbite, and he's fallen unconscious. Mom just sits in the corner crying and crying and crying. It's so fucking cold down here. I don't think we have long. I called 911 and they said they were sending someone, but that was half an hour ago. I don't think they can get through the snow and ice. This is my last attempt to get help. Please, for the love of God, help us. Update. Dad has started twitching and moving a little bit. I think he's waking up. The walls have iced over completely now. Still, no help from emergency services. I think this might be it. My bones feel so cold.